Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Greetings, I am DJ Ross. I am in Mountain View, California.
Greetings, Earthling. Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. This week we're playing Raft and Wordle, and we'll finally get to Wytchwood, I promise.
Will we, though? Will we?
I'm going to insist we start with it, in fact.
What if it just becomes this running joke?
Yeah.
Like, they never actually talk about Wytchwood. They've been saying that for 10 years.
I'm sorry I had to bump Matt Damon for time. He'll be back next week. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
that's a pretty, I guess, maybe, is that a deep pull? I'm not sure. That's maybe like an unusual reference. I'm not sure if people get that.
I don't know. I don't own a TV, so.
No. All right. You're one of those people who doesn't get it then.
Well.
Happy January. How's things?
Oh, you know. It's great. It hasn't snowed yet, so that's perfect.
Hey. It is snowing as we speak.
Oh, well. You're in the wrong place, I guess.
Yeah. I felt like that for a while now, but you know.
Oh, man. Oh, we did have a tsunami warning this weekend. That was different.
Wow.
Because of that volcano that exploded in Tonga.
Yeah, I heard about that.
It's amazing how the ocean works. Because it's just like, we didn't actually, I mean, at least in this area, there were not any huge tsunami-style waves that, you know, when you picture a tsunami. But I did see some video clips where there was just like a parking lot that was full of water. It's like, oh, well, that is a lot of water that's not supposed to be there. But the fact that people figured out when the waves would be arriving and they would like go down to the beach and film it. It's just kind of amazing to me. It's like this thing that happened on basically the other side of the planet, or like very far from here, at least.
Tonga's pretty close to you, right? I mean, you can see Tonga
it's
from your house.
Practically, yes. It's like, it's just right over there. But the fact that it's like, oh yeah, here come the waves from all the way across the ocean. And, they've been traveling for a while, so at this point, they're just these, they're like a little baby tsunami.
They're just exhausted. They're so tired, yeah.
Yeah. Still some kind of unusual videos.
I know you're a big surfer, DJ. Did you go out and hang 10?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, yeah, I love I love when I don't have to go all the way to the beach and I can just go to the parking lot.
Just go to your parking lot and do some
convenient
parking lot surfing, yeah.
Yeah. Happens only once in a blue moon, so I really got to be prepared.
Awesome. Well, this has been your weather report from DJ and Randy.
Yeah.
So, Wytchwood.
Wytchwood. Wait a minute. Are you sure you don't want to talk about either of these other games for 45 minutes?
It's going to be like...
No, let's just do it.
58 minutes, and then I'm like, oh, no, it happened again. Wytchwood is this delightful little game that I've been playing the last couple of weeks on the Switch, where you are a witch who wakes up with no memory in her little claptrap cabin and sets out into the world to try to figure out sort of like, why can't I remember things, and meets a mysterious goat who ropes her into a mystery where she has to use her spell book and her witchy skills to go out into the world and forage and assemble different, things necessary to do spells and things like that to help unlock her memory and, achieve the mission that the goat has set you on. This is quite a description, huh? I'm really doing a really good job at this.
But she still remembers all her spells, though.
She has a spell book.
Oh, that's right.
That's the helpful thing.
I was going to say, that'd be a very short game. You're just an amnesiac witch That's just some regular person at that point.
Right, yeah. What makes you a witch if you don't know spells?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you have access to this little portal that sends you all over different parts of the world. All of the little areas that you forage in have different environments to them. There's the forest, there's the desert, et cetera, et cetera. And each of them have a series of sort of missions that unfold. You're not doing combat, although you will run into things that will be hostile to you. Your only recourse in those situations is to run away and hide. But you are trying to sort of like get resources that you need to be able to do a series of spells to help this goat, and a larger mystery therein lies. And each component of a spell you're trying to craft requires you to do a series of favors for other people. Nothing is easy. You can get twigs and things by sort of going out into the woods and picking them off the ground. But if you need the hair of a dog, you have to find somebody who has a dog. And then, the dog is hostile and he's angry. So you have to find something that will distract him and calm him down. So you have to then go out into the woods and pick a berry that has sedative effects, or you have to use a trap to catch a squirrel.
Will you just like drug somebody's dog?
With the owner's permission.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with it. I'm also uncomfortable with catching the squirrels because you have to sort of find twigs and twine and reeds down by the river to fashion this little trap. And then you find where the squirrels are playing and bouncing around in the woods, and you put it down on the ground, and a little squirrel wanders over it. And I thought it would just sort of, innocuously snap closed. But nope, it just sort of snaps in a horrible noise and it explodes in blood red.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, I don't feel good about that at all. That's not a good feeling. I don't like that.
You need to, for this spell, you need to craft 3 squirrel exploders.
Right, exactly. And then you use squirrel meat to lure the dog, and et cetera, et cetera. And while he's noshing on squirrel meat, you can snip a little piece of his hair. But to snip a piece of his hair, you need a pair of shears. And to get the shears... Yeah. So
you
everything...
think you would just talk to the owner and be like, hey, I need 1 dog hair. Could you just produce one? It seems like it should be a small ask.
Right. Yes. And as somebody who lives with dogs, trust me, there is hair everywhere. Help yourself.
Yeah.
But no, not in this case, apparently. So yeah, you build over time this massive collection of foraged and sometimes exhaustingly earned pieces that you can then use to conduct spells and help unlock chunks of your memory and sort of further the plot of this thing. It's interesting that the entire game is built around exploration and crafting, whereas a lot of other games have a crafting component to them, for better or worse sometimes. The hook of Wytchwood is that it's all crafting all the time, and I guess your mileage may vary on that. I tend to find it satisfying. I think the way that it sort of implements it in Wytchwood is pretty easy and straightforward. The joy and the effort that goes into sort of finding some of these components and pieces is a big part of the experience. But then once you have the parts, crafting them is pretty simple. And then you get the satisfaction of that sort of next chunk of the story sort of unlocking itself and moving the thing forward. So if you're one of those people who hates crafting systems in video games, perhaps Wytchwood is not the game for you. But I find it fun. I find it kind of satisfying, and I continue to go back to it and continue to play it.
It's strange to me how often crafting seems to show up as a bullet point now in games. Like, I was just looking this weekend, I was just browsing the Steam store, and there are some games that look kind of cool, and then the little description was like, solve all these puzzles and craft like 100 different items. And I thought, I don't know if just the presence of a crafting system has ever enticed me to play a game.
Yeah. Well, because crafting is not a genre, right? It's a feature. It's a thing that happens in other games. It's not, it's not a role-playing game or an action game or a driving game. A crafting game, is that a thing? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it does seem like it's always just a mini game within some other game that you would,
Right.
you're there to play. And at this point,
Right.
it feels like every time I've encountered it, it's always kind of like gather X number of resources, put them in the pot, and click the button, and then that you have crafted the thing. But it doesn't seem like most of the time there's not a lot more nuance than that.
Right. If it's an RPG on your phone, you have to come back in 2 days.
Yeah, right. Unless you spend some gems. It's
Right.
just weird because like that system, it's fine. Like maybe at one point it was even novel, and maybe there was some appeal there.
Yeah.
But
Do you remember what was the first game you remember that being a major component? How far back in your memory does that go?
Oh man, I don't know. There was crafting in Star Trek Online in 2010, but that it wasn't especially good.
Yeah.
When did The Last of Us come out? Because that had crafting. That was much earlier than 2010, wasn't it? No, that was like 2012.
12, I think. Yeah. When was Dragon Quest 9? Because that was the first time I remember.
Dragon Quest 8 had a crafting system.
Did it? Okay. I must not have gotten that far.
Secret of Evermore on the Super Nintendo had a crafting system. That was probably like 1994. Although that was a very similar structure than like to modern crafting systems.
It's not evolved a ton in video games.
It hasn't really at all. Yeah. I mean, just looking back on it, if you haven't played that game, it's basically the same system. The only way it differed is that you wouldn't really craft things. You would gather these like reagents so you could cast spells, which is maybe a more interesting way or a more interesting implementation because you would just be doing this in real time. So basically the ingredients you had on hand dictated the number of times you could cast whatever spells you wanted to cast.
Oh, interesting.
But it wasn't like in all these other games, I pictured this system as like you go to a workshop and you look at your reagents and you say, okay, I can make 6 bandages and 3 hats. And then you take all the stuff you craft and you go and do whatever you're going to do with it.
What game was this?
Secret of Evermore.
That's good.
Super weird Squaresoft game for the Super Nintendo.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of it.
No, it kind of been lost to history because it's just not very popular.
Yeah.
But it did have an interesting like alchemy / crafting system. That was quite old though. I don't know, like probably Dragon Quest 8 and 9 had their crafting system. That seemed like that has just become the sort of the modern model for crafting.
Yeah.
Not saying that's where it originated, but that's probably my first memory of it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the hook in Dragon Quest 9 was that you had to sort of gather these things while you were out into the overworld and put them in a pot, right? And then the pot would sort of like cook them up into whatever you were trying to sort of manufacture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that one you would use to like build equipment and items and things. So
right,
there was definitely some use in that.
Yeah. Wytchwood has not deviated significantly from that. I think probably the most significant deviation is that it's just all crafting all the time. In part you're sort of traveling the overworld, talking to other people, sometimes venturing into the brush and picking up sticks and picking reeds down by the river or picking mushrooms. But sometimes the ingredients are much harder to come by and require, a pretty long list of steps and machinations that you have to implement to be able to get them, like the hair of the dog thing. So, I think the developers here have at least tried to sort of add some layers of complexity and interest to it. But again, I think it's one of those things that can be very divisive. I suspect there's somebody listening to this who is like, this sounds like my hell. Who is not a fan.
It's kind of like just busy work.
Yeah.
It's like a grocery list.
Sure. Which I think, frequently games, life sim games like Animal Crossing tend to sort of get maybe dismissed as or condescended to as just sort of like, oh, it's a to-do list. Wytchwood is very much a to-do list kind of game. You are absolutely sort of venture into the world with a list of, I need an eye of newt, I need a hair of dog, I need 2 mushrooms and a twig or to do this thing that unlocks the next challenge, the next bit of my memory, the next objective I'm trying to move forward in this game. There will be a series of sometimes unfortunate events that you have to tolerate or instigate to be able to get those things to happen.
So what happens when you collect all the ingredients? You just throw it in a cauldron, I hope. And then,
you can do some stuff kind of on the fly. You do have a cauldron back at your little witch shack that you can use for such things as well. So it's not like you have to go out and if you need something quick, if you need the aforementioned squirrel trap, the squirrel exploder, you don't have to go back to your pot in your cabin to whip that up. You can do that kind of on the fly just by opening up your spell book, your menu in the game, selecting the 3 things that you need to implement that, and hitting a button. But there are sort of bigger things that do require you being at a specific place or having access to specific implements, or being in your shack with the pot and stuff like that. So I feel like maybe I'm not really selling this game.
Well, I'm just curious. So, is it basically just a crafting game then? Is that what you find yourself looking forward to doing?
Yeah. I mean, well, the exploration is probably the most compelling part of it. The little nuggets of the story, meeting the interesting characters along the way, those kinds of things. Yeah. I mean, the crafting is the thing that moves all of those elements forward and moves the story forward.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's the developers here have done, I think, a pretty decent job of surrounding that mechanic, surrounding that bullet with, an exploration based. Yeah, I'm hesitant to call it an RPG because it's not really even that. An adventure game, an exploration based adventure game.
Sure. Okay. That's interesting. That's kind of unexpected, because when I think about Witch, I think of, somebody in a big pointy hat going out and casting spells on things, and that would be the game. I don't really think of the, staying at home in your little mushroom hut and mixing stuff side of being a witch. But no, that's totally valid. So that's just not what I was expecting from this.
Yeah, the witch is a compelling character. They've resisted, I think, a lot of the urges to steer into kind of pop culture, which is no flying on broomsticks, no pointy hats. She's a bit of a shut-in. You have a pot actually over your head. It's a cook pot over your head. You're a bit of a recluse, a bit of a shut-in. People comment they don't see you around much and stuff like that. So it's basically kind of you sitting alone in your sad hut. Reading books and doing witchy things. It is against your nature to be this social, to be this outgoing, to have to talk to people and do favors. So you get a little bit of a social rub from that of her generally not wanting to be out of the house.
I kind of feel like you need the hat at least.
I don't know if you get that later, if it's something I've not finished it yet. I feel like I'm in the home stretch, but you've maybe you unlock a pointy hat later. I'm not sure if that's an objective at some point, but it's not a Halloween witch. It's not a Disney witch. It's some other kind of thing they're proposing here.
Okay.
All of that said, I'm having a good time with it. I continue to play it. I keep going back to it. I find it compelling and engaging. I've had a good time with it. Exploding squirrels notwithstanding.
Right. Man, I have a lot of games on my list to play that involve you being a little witch in the woods. And man, I'm going to have to go through that list again and just double check to see how many of them you spend exclusively crafting stuff. Because again, that was not my mental picture for each of these games. But this was not on it, so maybe I'll just add this to the list so I can get the whole witch experience spectrum.
Yeah, at the very least, check out the trailer and maybe try to get a sense of whether or not it's for you. It's a beautiful game. I've not even sort of mentioned that. It does have this sort of like construction paper and paints kind of aesthetic to it. The woods are very sort of dense and filled with little critters and mysterious fauna and stuff like that. So it's the world is very sort of expansive and well realized, but all sort of done out of kind of construction paper and kiddie style art.
It's nice. You know, to
Yeah.
just look kind of cute.
Definitely. So that is Wytchwood.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, we did it.
Done it. Did the thing. And now we don't have time for anything else. Have a good week.
Oh man. Okay. Yeah. That's it. That's it this week. Now I have found myself playing the game Raft once again, and I say it like that because I played a version of this a long time ago when it was still like a little tiny game just getting started on itch, and now it is in Steam Early Access. Although when I went to look at it, it's apparently been in Early Access since 2018, which was a long time ago.
Yeah, seriously.
So I don't really know what to make of that. It seems like there's plenty to play there at this point. So it's been an interesting sort of experience coming back to it and just seeing or trying to remember what the game was like previously so I can figure out what is different now. The premise is you are on this tiny little raft in the middle of the open ocean, and as stuff, sort of junk, drifts by your raft, you need to grab it using this little grappling hook thing you have. And after you amass enough materials, oh, surprise, you can craft stuff with it to expand your raft and, basically build up all the amenities on your raft and, cook food and purify water for yourself. And it's basically a survival game where it doesn't feel like you're like working towards like a definitive end to this thing. It's just sort of like, how long can you survive on this raft, and how lavish of a like a raft fort or house or whatever can you build while fending off dangerous sharks and making sure you don't die of dehydration and all that stuff.
Wow, sounds harrowing.
Yeah, like it's actually, if you think about the premise, it's like, oh, that sounds terrifying. Nobody wants to just be stranded in the middle of the ocean and there are sharks circling them. It sounds horrible. But the way it's presented is it's very pleasant. It's just got very like bright, colorful graphics, sort of like Sea of Thieves, where you're, similar setting where you're just in the middle of the ocean and everything is very like sunny. And there's all this beautiful blue water around you. The sharks are rendered very nicely. They're like, I was going to say they're not too terrifying, but I mean, it's hard for a shark to not be just incredibly frightening if all you're doing is standing on a couple of planks in the middle of the ocean. Mm-hmm. But it feels like it's designed to be like a comfortable environment. Like when you load up the game on the title screen, it loads in what seems like another raft that a player has built. And these are like seriously deluxe rafts at this point. So they've got, several levels. They've got roofs over them made of like palm fronds, and they've got all these amenities and structures on them that they look amazing. But when you first load up your brand new game, you're just stuck on like a 2x2 little grid of wooden planks, and all you've got is your grappling hook, and it's kind of jarring coming from that title screen. It looks very comfortable.
And you're waiting for things to float by so that you can grapple onto them and assemble a more lavish and elaborate raft. Yeah.
Apparently, you're like down current of some incredible, like either natural disaster or just a cataclysmic shipwreck, because there's just an unlimited supply of planks and plastic jugs and like palm fronds and things just drifting in like through your path.
There's a bunch of litter buggers is what it is. People just throwing crap into the water.
Maybe this is just what it looks like in the open ocean at this point. Who knows?
Plastic water bottles, face masks.
Yeah, just no face masks yet, but maybe soon. Fortunately for you, though, it turns into an unlimited supply of resources for you to harvest. So you just spend the first few minutes of this game just trying to figure out how your grappling hook works and rope in as much stuff as you can. And then, you can start to think about, at some point I should start to figure out what I'm doing for food and water. And eventually unlocking more advanced crafting recipes, of course, because that seems to be the biggest sort of change that I remember from playing this on itch, is that there are so many more crafting recipes that you have to unlock by procuring rarer and rarer supplies. So, kind of interesting just seeing how advanced everything gets. I got into this because, like I mentioned a couple episodes ago, my friends and I have just been searching for the next Valheim alternative, because we kind of wrapped that up. And this was on a kind of a short list of the candidates we put together. So this weekend we all hopped into this. We're just like, oh, let's try out this Raft thing. And let me say, it is hysterical when like 4 or 5 people spawn in and they're all just on this tiny, like just a shipping pallet size worth of wood in the middle of the ocean. It's like, oh, like it's a good thing that you don't really push other players around, because we would just all be on the water immediately, I think, if that were the case. But it was an interesting first couple of hours just figuring out just like how the general flow of the game works, how you're supposed to be picking up supplies, and oh, we're getting hungry, like you have a little hunger and thirst meter down in the corner, and it's like, oh, it's flashing red now because we haven't eaten anything this entire time, so what do we do about that? And you start to figure out just what the systems of the game are, and how to address them.
Do you go Oregon Trail and eat one of your buddies?
It hasn't come to that yet.
No.
Luckily. The like death system and respawning system is like fairly generous in that you just respawn back on the raft. We figured out that when you die, at least in the normal difficulty, you lose all the items you're carrying. So the first maybe hour or so, when we were still figuring out our food supply chain, we were like, oh man, I'm about to starve to death again, so I'm just going to toss everything that I'm carrying onto the raft, and somebody, like, it'll just be like waiting there for when I respawn in a couple seconds. So it's a little silly.
Clever.
Yeah. But since then, we figured out, we've built beds for people to respawn on. We've definitely gotten better about, producing food regularly. People kind of settled into different roles where like somebody would be fishing all the time and other people would be just trying to hook stuff as it goes by. I was feeding ingredients into like this research station, which, unlocks more crafting recipes.
You have a research station on your raft?
Well, I mean, that's a fancy way of describing just a table with like a recipe book on it.
Got it, okay.
Although some of the stuff in the book, it gets surprisingly advanced. Like you can build an ore smelter, which is like, okay, is that safe to have on a wooden raft? I don't know.
You'd think open flames would be a problem, yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, even like with that in mind, there are all these different ways you can reinforce your raft. And like I was saying, build just like multiple stories and different other facilities. Like you can, that's something we didn't really get into when we were playing it because we were just trying to survive mostly. But one of the coolest things about Valheim was just building up the base after a certain point. Mm-hmm. So I can definitely imagine coming back to it at some point and just seeing somebody has added on a second level or set up little rooms for people or something like that.
Excellent. Did Valheim have a survival component to it, or was it really just kind of exploration and building, crafting?
It did. At this point, I don't think it was like you had to keep eating to maintain your health. Maybe you did. I don't remember exactly. But it was more something you needed to do. You had to eat food to regenerate your stamina and keep your health high in case you got into a combat or something.
Gotcha.
But even then, it was like, I don't think anybody ever starved to death.
So you're not generally in danger of starving to death.
Yeah, which is something, it's like, I play a lot of survival games where that aspect of it is just not tuned in a way that is fun.
Yeah.
Because, I don't want that to be the thing that I'm just thinking about the entire time. It's like, where am I going to get more food so I can just be alive to play the rest of the game?
Yeah. There was I think a small series of DS games, and I think they made the jump to the Wii at some point called Lost in Blue. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Are you familiar with those? Did you play those?
I never played them.
It was it's I think a similar conceit. You weren't stuck on a raft. You actually sort of washed up on a deserted island, and you had you could play with a co-op partner. There was somebody else you were there with, and you had to, quickly, build a shelter or build a fire and find food. But it had this ever-present threat of a hunger meter that was just rapidly ticking down. And it felt like you couldn't get more than 25 steps away from where you started without being starving. And then, another 20 steps away, starving to death. So it just, after 5 or 6 attempts to play one of these games, I was sort of like, nope, I don't find that fun at all. Yeah. I think maybe I could, what can you go? I think what's the thing? You can go 3 days without eating, 4 days without eating, something like that. I think maybe I'd be okay for slightly more.
Oh,
than
you mean
50
like
steps.
in real life you can go 3 days without eating?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can definitely go more than like 20 steps. Like, oh, that was it. I'm dead.
I fall over. I die.
Yeah.
Just within eye shot of the person you were scavenging with. Yeah.
A hunger system is definitely an interesting system to have in a game because a lot of games don't make you keep track of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it's overdone like that, it's a problem.
That's what the question in The Last of Us and things like it's like, what's everybody eating? Where do you guys shower? Right? Like, how do I take care of my basic human needs?
I feel like nobody in The Last of Us ever showers.
No, it's pretty grubby. Yeah.
Yeah, it's dirty all the time. Anyway, so it's not a huge problem in Raft, especially since we had like kind of a group of people, and there was somebody just being very diligent about restocking the grills, and with like fish that we would catch, and like beets that we would find in barrels floating by because sure. So that was nice. Although I found like after the group game, I went back to it a little bit and played around on a different difficulty setting because there are quite a few levels that you can tweak. So the one we were playing on was like the standard difficulty, which has like the normal levels of like hunger and thirst and sort of threats from wildlife like the shark. And sometimes you can land on like a deserted island to look for supplies, but there might be hostile wildlife there. There's an even more difficult difficulty setting, which I wasn't going to touch, but I think I ended up knocking it down to the point where you get less hungry and thirsty, and then there's no threat from wildlife like the sharks. Because I was kind of like, eventually I'll go back and I'll play the group game again and have to worry about all that stuff. But I'm using the separate game to just kind of learn how everything works and maybe get a little farther into the crafting system when I don't have to spend as much time worrying about my food supplies and all that.
Without the threat of starving to death.
Yeah. Because I like that, but I'm sometimes I just want a lighter experience.
Right. Well, that was my experience playing Don't Starve. Sort of like, geez, this game would be a lot more fun if I couldn't starve.
Right. Well, that's an interesting case because, it's like almost oppressive how much you have to manage your hunger and whatever other resources in that game, like your sanity meter or whatever.
Yeah.
But also the game just feels like the challenge is how long you can survive. So like if it was easy, then it feels like it's kind of pointless.
Right. Yeah. No, I get what they were going for. It's just, it's another one of those games where I find sort of little things, some little rub, some little friction point where I'm like, nope, this is not my thing.
Yeah. Like even Minecraft has a hunger system, which I think is interesting. Like every time I really start a new Minecraft game thinking like, I'm going to do it this time, I'm going to play survival mode. I'm going to just be like gathering all my resources by hand and all that. It's going to be great. I make it like a couple hours and I'm just like, I don't want to be hungry anymore. And I just turn off all those systems. It's just because there's much more interesting stuff to do in those games. And I don't want to have to be dealing with hunger all the time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So does it scratch the Valheim itch? Are you finding that it is satisfying in the way that Valheim was?
It kind of does, although like going back to how I was describing Valheim a couple of weeks ago, it's just like Valheim did so many things really well that we just haven't found an exact equivalent of in another game. And the biggest differences, at least for me, between Valheim and Raft are like Valheim, you had a persistent server, which was nice because you could like log in anytime, even when other people weren't playing. And this one, you kind of have to have somebody like host the game, which is like, well, that's fine. It's not a huge deal because we can just coordinate and figure out when people are going to be online. But also, I really just liked the fact that Valheim had just a stationary home base and wasn't on this raft that's floating through the ocean. Because even though you can kind of like anchor yourself, you can like throw down an anchor and stop your raft if you pass by an interesting island or something. Eventually you do have to move on so you can get back into that stream of junk that's flowing by and get your resources back up.
Oh, gotcha.
But I like that Valheim kind of had this feeling that like it was just a place where you could hang out for a while and you weren't necessarily being attacked from all sides or really having to worry a lot about staying alive. You could just spend some time like building up the base or doing some exploration if you felt like it. And this one, it feels like there's much less of an exploration component, just more like whatever just happens to be in your path as this raft floats sort of aimlessly through the ocean.
Right.
But it's cool. I mean, I like the whole process of starting from zero in a survival game like this and slowly building up and like, oh, someday we'll have enough materials to build this crazy thing that's in the recipe book that we can't even fathom owning right now. And just like getting to that point. It's like in any game with sort of RPG elements where you level up and you're just like, oh man, someday I'm going to be level 99. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to come back and just kill all these rabbits in one hit. And, these bosses that I'm struggling right now are going to be a total pushover.
Right.
So it definitely offers that sort of sense of progress and discovery. I'm trying not to read too much into how the rest of the game systems work, because that was a huge draw for me about Valheim, was just like, I don't know anything about this, so I'm just going to let myself sort of discover everything naturally, because that's it's more interesting to me.
Cool. Well, sounds like kind of an interesting conceit.
Yeah, I like it. I'm glad to see that it still seems to be pretty popular. I'm not really sure what to make of the fact that it's been in early access for 4 years. But
it's pretty late access at this point, I think.
Yeah. Don't really hold that against it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I had not heard of that. Sounds like an interesting proposition.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know if it's going to be on like PS4 or other platforms at this point. I don't know how the early access status might affect that.
Right.
But pretty cool if you're looking for a survival game. I still am hoping that maybe someday they'll release another Valheim update, or somebody will come up with something similar now that Valheim has been out for a while and people have had a chance to figure out like kind of what worked and what didn't work about that game. They can make like a Valheim inspired sort of follow-up. Would be cool.
All right. Can you share what are some of the other co-op survival kind of games that are on your list to explore?
Oh, I don't have my list in front of me right now, but I think it was I think Rust was on there, but I think that's more of a hardcore. I don't know if it's permadeath, but definitely not as chill of an experience as Valheim, at least from what I've read. Raft was on there. What else? My friends and I played Don't Starve. We did not really care for it.
No.
So, yeah.
What's the Don't Starve Together, right? Is that the...
Yeah.
Got to watch out for the pigmen.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many... Like, that game, it just felt like they added all these obstacles to prevent you from really enjoying the game. Or maybe that's the point. It's just like, oh man, look how just brutally difficult it is to stay alive in this game.
Yeah, just sort of
not have
irreversible damage that you explore a little too far, you do a little something more than you're supposed to do. You get a little ballsy, and then you just get wiped out.
Yeah, that game felt much more like you have to go into it with kind of a roguelike mindset, like the fact that you are going to die multiple times as you learn how the game works. But like Valheim, you would die all the time, but you would just get reset back to your base, which then you could continue building up. And it was just a huge bummer that you had to start from scratch every time and don't starve.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
Cool.
we'll see how this Raft thing pans out, and then maybe I'll get back to other stuff on the list, because there were some other like survival games that did sound interesting.
Cool. Briefly want to talk about Wordle. Have you embraced
Wordle.
the Wordle phenomena?
I've played some Wordle.
Yeah. So for our listeners, if somehow you've not heard of this, this is a little indie puzzle game that has sort of quickly become a thing. The story, as I've heard it, is it was a little toy, a little programming toy that the developer made for their partner, who liked word games. And it was really just meant to be a thing that they experienced, but shared it with some friends. Those friends shared it with other friends, and now there's like hundreds of thousands of people playing it every day.
Yeah. It's a cool story.
Yeah. And it's a very sort of kind of minimalist experience. It doesn't ask you to log in with your Facebook username. You don't have to give up any privacy information. You don't give it access to your location or anything crazy like that. You just go there on a browser. It's not even an app. Open it up on a browser, and then once a day there is a new kind of word puzzle for you to try out. You get 5 blank spaces. You can pick any 5-letter word you can imagine to drop in there, and if the letters are correct with the word of the day, you get a green light. The square lights up green, and if it's a correct letter, wrong place, it turns yellow. And if it's the wrong letter, that letter does not appear in the word, it turns gray. And you know not to try that letter again. So you get 6, I believe, tries to guess the word of the day by using those little cues, trying to make sure that your letters all light up green, you have them all in the right places, and you pick the right word by sort of slowly sort of narrowing it down from a list of all the 5-letter words you can possibly think of in your brain.
Yeah, more or less like you ever played Mastermind?
Yes, exactly like Mastermind.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like the first time I played it, I was thrown off by the fact that you can only use real words.
Yes.
Because my inclination was just to put in, like, I know the most commonly used letters in the alphabet, so I'm just going to run through them like some kind of robot. But it doesn't let you do that, so you have to actually make, like, valid words out of them.
Real 5-letter words, yeah.
Yeah.
So as you start getting green lights, as you start getting letters that light up green, it becomes even more difficult to think of, like, what 5-letter words can I think of that have an R as the first letter and F as the third. So you can, like, slowly sort of paint yourself into a corner sometimes by landing on the right letters, but also sort of realizing you don't know that many words.
Oh, I was going to say, I think it only gets easier as you get through the guesses.
Yeah, it's supposed to, but I find that sometimes that I stare at these blanks sometimes going, like I said, like, what the hell starts with an R and has an F in the middle? That or whatever. Pick any sort of random 5-letter word with a couple of mysterious, like a crossword puzzle, a couple of weird letters in strange places that you're trying to sort of like reverse engineer your way into. Without a hint, without a clue. It doesn't sort of say, like, today's word of the day is a toy or is a phrase, or, it's just any 5-letter word in the English language. So yeah, I have stumbled across a few, like, 5-letter words in my brain that are always my sort of first 1 or 2 tries that, like, seem to have.
I was going to ask you if you have an opening strat.
I have I've developed one over time. I was not so strategic in my first couple of plays, but over time, my first word now is always ramen, R-A-M-E-N.
Interesting.
5 different letters, all fairly common letters, 2 good vowels in there that pop up a lot, and generally I find that I get a couple of hits, maybe a couple of yellows, if I'm lucky, a green, and then just sort of narrow it down from there. I've heard people use the word adieu a lot, A-D-I-E-U. Am I spelling it
vowels.
Right? I-E-A-U? Yeah, because there's a lot of vowels, and you can basically, once you sort of figure out the vowels, you can sort of reverse engineer your way into what the consonants are. But yeah, there's a couple of these fun little theories going around what your opening strategy is. What is yours, DJ? Do you have one?
Yes, I was trying to figure out, something using the most common letters. I was going to use saint or stain, because it has AIST.
Yeah.
I think, and the N is also in there.
Yep.
And then I was like, well, I would love to have an S in the 5th position, because I feel like that is kind of common. What words out of those letters end with S? So just on a complete lark, I typed in tains, Tains, which turns out is a valid word. So now I just use this word, which I don't even know what it means.
Yeah.
But, it's worked out very well for me.
Oh, that's funny. And unlike Scrabble, no one will challenge you. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's a word, so it wouldn't let me type it in if it wasn't valid.
Right. Well, that's the thing. In Scrabble, you can play something, but you have to be able, right? If somebody challenges you, you have to be able to define it. Isn't that?
Yeah.
Maybe that's just a house rule. But yeah, that's always... well,
I mean, ideally, you're playing words that you know are real words that don't require you to be challenged.
And not trying to burn letters.
Yeah, you should try playing Scrabble with some of my friends, see how well that works for you. I was going to say, I got kind of dismayed seeing people's like pro strategies for this, where they're just like, okay, how many just weird words can we make out of the most common 10 letters, where they would do... I think people figured out that there are just like 2 words you can put in that have all 10 letters, or it encompasses all 10 letters after you've put both of them in.
Oh, I don't want to know that.
They just always open with that.
Yeah, keep that to yourself.
But I feel like, I don't know, just the fact that people are optimizing it that much just sucks a lot of the joy out of it.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree completely. I've read 2 or 3 articles about the creator over the last couple of weeks. He seems to be getting a little bit of press lately. There was an article in the New York Times about him. And the article mentioned sort of like the author's strategy. And I'm like, no, I don't want to know that. I'm reluctant to even share it here on the podcast. But because I think, it's one of those things you kind of have to, futz your way through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's totally valid if people want to play it like that, but
sure.
I just don't like when people like hyper optimize things. Like this is totally kind of a tangent, but whenever I see people getting like Monster Hunter Rise just came out on PC, and whenever I see people talking about this, that's always like, oh man, what kind of armor set? Like, what's the first armor set I should build? And people will go, okay, here is the one definitive armor set you can get right away. This will carry you through like the first couple hours of the game. And I'm just like, man, it's not how I like to play games. Just go into something and figure out, okay, what is the absolute 100% most optimal route? Don't let me figure anything out for myself. Just let me use this guide so I can like just check all these boxes as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And again, if you want to play the game that way, that's totally fine. If that's what you enjoy, I'm just saying that is so different than how I approach games like this.
I agree. Yeah, that's generally my experience too. I do find sometimes that I get RPGs especially, I sort of like, I don't know what to pick. I don't know what class I want. I think sometimes they make a mistake early on to go, you must choose your class, and this cannot be changed later. And it doesn't give you enough information to make an informed choice. So I will, put my 3DS down and then go to the internet and go, what class should I pick in this one game? Yeah. Yakuza 7, it was sort of like, how do I get more money? How do I get all the money?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do look sometimes for little clues on sort of addressing some of the rough spots in games for me, some of the pain points. But yeah, I think something like this is such a Wordle specifically is such a small experience, a little thing. It's not some expansive.
The stakes are so low on this,
right? Exactly. And you know what? If you don't get today's word, there's a new one tomorrow. You have to wait until midnight, and it flips over.
I do really like. I mean, that I'm sure that has a lot to do with just the buzz around this thing. It's the fact that you can only play it once a day.
Yeah.
Because like if you could play as much as you want, those same people would just burn themselves out within like 15 minutes. You'd be like, oh, that's enough of this thing, and then it would have been gone within a couple of days.
That was when I first introduced it to Sarah. She was like, well, how do I do another one? And I'm like, you have to wait. She's like, I have to wait 3 hours? And we just happened to be doing it at 9 o'clock at night. And I'm like, we have to wait until midnight. So if you do it first thing in the morning, you have to wait 17 hours. She's like, that's ridiculous. And I'm like, no, it's cool. It's like forced scarcity. It like,
exactly.
I don't know. I kind of appreciate it. Plus we're all having the same experience at the same time. It's kind of one of the things I think that is, cool and compelling about the New York Times crossword puzzle is that, in a city like New York City, puzzle. everybody's doing the same puzzle at the same time on the same day. It's sort of this shared community experience. I think, I kind of dig
like
that
the
Wordle has.
Spelunky Daily Challenge.
There you go.
Back the next day.
Exactly. Although that's different for everybody. No, it's the same for everybody, right? I remember you explaining that to me at one point.
Yeah.
So it's not some random set of, well, it is a random set of things, but it's the same random set for everybody playing the challenge.
Yeah, it's the same experience.
In Wordle, we're all trying to figure out what the same word is. So, I love and I know people have complained about this, but I like the little posts on Twitter and Facebook, and people sort of like talking about their progress determining today's Wordle of the day. I find that really fun and kind of compelling. As, I got it in 3 guesses. It took you 4. Haha. I think stuff like that's super fun.
Yeah, I'm over the little social media posts at
Are
this
you
point.
Really? Yeah. No, I kind of like it. But yeah, I've had a good time with it. I don't know. It is just a weird random thing that I now find myself. Normally I get to about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, there's a new Wordle. I go and I do the puzzle and it's fun. And then, the next morning I have a new thing to look forward to.
Yeah. That's enough. That's fine. You don't need to do 100 Wordles every day.
Yeah. Well, that is the downside of things like, Picross, is that I get one of those Picross games and it's like, now with 400 puzzles. And I'm like, well, I'm sorted. I don't have anything else to do for the rest of the week. I just play Picross.
Yeah.
I like, the scarcity of Wordle. I get my one for the day and then I'm done.
Yeah. They should really meter out those Picross things. You can only play one a day. Maybe I'd start picking those up again.
Yeah. I'd be down with that. 360. That'd be that's the way to do it. You do a new Picross game, $7, $8. That sounds like a reasonable amount of money. 365 Picross a day puzzles.
Yeah, there you go.
A full year of Picrosses.
It'd be great if it was kind of the New York Times crossword level of difficulty. It'd have to be a 30 by 30 Picross thing.
Those are real time consuming though. That's over an hour of work, right?
Well, maybe. But if I was just thinking, whenever a new Picross game comes out on the Switch, it opens with 100 puzzles that are 10 by 10. It's this is what is this? Don't waste my time with this thing.
Can I just skip ahead to people who have played Picross before?
Yeah, that's the one I want.
Yeah, Picross for people who have their shit together.
Advanced Picross.
Yeah. Cool. So that's Wordle. It's free. It's a website on the internet. I can't remember what it is, but if you Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah. I suppose we can also put a link in the show post.
We could do that. Yeah, absolutely.
In case you're not on social media, you haven't seen anybody posting the green and yellow squares.
Yep. I have resisted the urge to flood our Discord with those.
Please do not do that. Oh my God, I'll go insane.
We'll set up a separate channel just for that.
You can set up, Wordle channel. We can just quarantine people in there.
It's just green and yellow and black squares.
Yeah. Oh, man. All right. Well, before we wrap up, we have an email that I want to read because we have been sitting on it for a little while.
Nice. And
it's a very cool email. Actually, so if you've been paying close attention, actually, this is just to you. So I don't know why I'm telling everybody this. This actually answers a long-standing mystery about the show.
Oh,
which again, it was a mystery, so we never talked about it on air. But I'll see if you picked up on what it was. I'm just gonna get into it. This comes from a friend of the show, Obi Hyde. You may remember from previous emails to the show, but anyway, this is actually a follow-up to I forget how this came up during our end-of-year show. I guess we were talking about Taco Bell, and he was in the chat and asked for Taco Bell recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
So we provided some, and he is good on his word. He has come through with a full Taco Bell report based on this our recommendation. So I'm just going to get into it.
Sure.
It says, hello, Randy and DJ. Thanks for another great year and another great Drunktacular. Thanks as well to you and the whole community for the Taco Bell advice. Although before I submit my report, I should make a confession. For the first 6 years of my listening to VGHangover, I assumed you had a much larger audience. I figured that if these guys showed up high on a search for video game podcasts on my old BlackBerry, they must be a pretty big deal. I think I was more embarrassed than disappointed when, after the 2020 Drunktacular, I told my wife that it was me and about 7 other people in attendance. But I quickly came to appreciate the small community feel. It was like a secret club that I'm asked to tell my friends about every week. I had to just stop myself from interjecting in like every other line in this thing. I'm gonna wait for the end.
I'm biting my lip as well. Yes.
Continuing. So Taco Bell. I remember being 14 years old in 1994, having walked to Blockbuster to rent Super Empire Strikes Back for the Super Nintendo.
Wow.
My friend and I stayed up way too late trying to beat the Swamp Boss in Dagobah when we went out for a late night snack. Most places were closed, but the drive-thru for Taco Bell was open. I remember jumping where we thought the sensor was, trying to get somebody to take our order. I also remember my friend's mad dash home to make it to a toilet, and it wasn't a big part of my diet thereafter. 27 years later, I have a lovely wife who worked for an organic food cooperative. She tends to care about what she puts into her body, which means not a lot of Taco Bell. I tend to like the games and music you guys suggest, so over the course of a couple of years, my curiosity with regards to the bell grew. Finally, an advertisement for the triple-double Crunchwrap shows up in my house. As a math teacher, I am immediately interested in this thing for at least 6 reasons. The biggest surprise is that my wife decides that she would like to try one as well. So here's our order. The kids had cheese quesadillas. The lady and I shared a fries supreme with ground beef, and we split a 7-layer bean burrito. We each got our own veggie crunch wraps, and we finished with cinnamon twists and Cinnabon delights. The entire time, I was chasing this all down with a Baja Blast.
Wow. Holy cow.
Sounds like quite a feast.
Yeah.
And he continues, I should explain that I live in Ontario, Canada, and that we have fewer flavors than most states I have visited. For example, if I go to grocery stores anywhere except for Toronto, I usually find 2 flavors of Doritos or Cheerios or Oreos. I remember visiting small towns outside of Buffalo and seeing like 12 flavors of the foods above, so the chance to get a different flavor of Mountain Dew was a pretty big deal. Mountain Dew is Mountain Dew is usually the drink I get at a movie theater whenever enough time has gone by for me to forget how much I hate Mountain Dew. I was pleasantly surprised by the drink. Kind of tasted like Sprite when you're not expecting, or when you are expecting Mountain Dew. Sprite tastes pretty freaking good. The fries supreme did not disappoint. 16-bit memories flooded my brain. The bean burrito was good, reliable but not showy, like a Toyota Corolla. The crunch wrap was interesting. By that time, I may have been approaching my bean threshold. It seems like they threw the thing in a centrifuge, forcing all the cheese product to the outsides. And I suspect that leaving this for last was not the best idea, as I detected far fewer crunches than the title would suggest. The cinnamon twists were fine, but the Cinnabon delights stole the show. It was like my tongue had a baby with a sunrise. And my son said the quesadilla was dude, because he's working on his hard G's. And my daughter said, these are better than mommy's. Ooh.
Oh, no.
So he wraps up. I'm not sure I can convince my wife to make another run, but we will be going back for dessert again. Thanks for the advice, Obi Hyde.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Obi Hyde, for that incredibly thorough and just history-filled Taco Bell report. Glad that I haven't tried the Cinnabon things. I say glad at least those turned out well. And the quesadilla.
Yeah, Sarah's a big fan. Those are, I've heard those are quite good. I've not had them myself.
Yeah, you really have to get to the crunch wrap sooner or earlier in your meal to get the full experience, I suppose. But man, it sounds like he had quite a lot on his plate.
Yeah, I mean those French fries. That's just a mess. That French fries with meat and cheese and all kinds of toppings on it. That's just a bowl full of regret, probably.
I don't know if I've had. So that sounds like it's like the nachos, but it's fries instead of the chips.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, man, I'm definitely an advocate for those fries. The fries supreme sounds excellent.
Yeah, but this is great. No, I love the full report here. I've interacted with a few people because we tend to be so pro Taco Bell. I've had interesting conversations over the years with folks who have grown up in places where they don't have access to Taco Bell and have never had it. We had a listener once upon a time who told us that they had never had a taco ever in their life.
What?
They grew up in very remote part of the English countryside, and it just was not part of the menu anywhere.
Okay, I remember this.
Did not understand the appeal because it just had never had that experience. It's I'm reading this and seeing in Canada that they must have some different stuff going on the menu than here, because I'm not familiar with the triple double crunch wrap, so I'm not sure where that comes from. I suspect maybe it's a Canadian delicacy.
I just like that he points out that in general, Canada has fewer flavors than the US. I'm not saying that as a slight against Canada. I feel like whenever I go to the store, I'm just like, God, why are there so many different versions of everything? Like, who is buying like nacho cheese blasted goldfish crackers or whatever?
Yeah.
They could
I don't disagree.
Trim it down a little bit. Okay, my question for you, though, is did you catch the great mystery, the great VG Hangover mystery that is addressed in this email?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, well, just allow me to go behind the scenes.
Sure.
Earlier in the podcast history, we would be much more sort of stringent about checking the listener stats for each episode. Because we can kind of see where people are listening to the show, what regions are from, which episodes are being downloaded, what devices people are listening to episodes on. And we were always fascinated because we would look at these stats and we go, okay, so there's people listening to it on Apple, in their browser or Android or whatever. And then there's this one BlackBerry user who is listening to this podcast on a BlackBerry. That's weird. And we were just couldn't figure it out. And it turns out, after all these years, the whole time, it was Mr. Obi Hyde. So thank you very much for solving that long-standing unanswered question.
Excellent. No, I didn't piece that together, but now that you say it, it all comes rushing back. I remember us specifically targeting the BlackBerry because in the early days of the podcast, I had been given one for work, and it had a very sort of rudimentary podcast aggregator on it, and I was like, well, we should get on there. So I found out how to submit a podcast to the BlackBerry Podcast Store or whatever the heck it was, and apparently the rest is history. So cool. I'm super excited it got Obi Hyde on our radar.
Yeah, you're single-handedly responsible for bringing Obi Hyde on board.
And just in our defense, we have a pretty large audience. I mean, without getting into specifics.
Yeah. I mean, there's several people who listen to the show.
Yes. Tens of people.
Because there are dozens of us. But anyway.
Are you kidding? I'd kill for a dozen.
Come on.
I know, I'm kidding. I'm joking. No, we love our crowd. It's great. I would not have it any other way, honestly.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much again, Obi Hyde, for writing in this very detailed report. You can email us anytime, anybody listening to this. Just email contact@VGHangover.com if you have a weird Taco Bell story or just anything that's on your mind. Feel free to send it in.
Awesome. Well, if you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should definitely follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. You can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about the episode at VGHangover.com. We would love for you to join us on Discord, hang out with me and DJ and Obi Hyde, and a bunch of people not talking about the Wordle of the day. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com as well. And we would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you can get a podcast. Join the secret club where we ask you to tell your friends about it every week.
Yeah. Tell your friends if they're on a BlackBerry, because I think they just shut that thing down, right?
They did, just last week, yeah.
So, man, Obi Hyde may not even hear this. Oh, man, rip. But tell your BlackBerry-owning friends that they should pick up some other kind of cell phone and then subscribe to the show.
Man, I miss cell phones that had keyboards. Did you ever have a phone with a clicky, QWERTY keyboard on it?
Not like BlackBerry style.
No?
I don't know. No, I never had the full keyboard. That was intense.
That's my first couple of Android phones. It was the big feature was it had a keyboard.
I was pretty good with the T9 or whatever it was. I don't think I needed the full keyboard.
Yeah. I was never good at that. I always needed the full keyboard. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well.
Anyway. I want to give special thanks again to Protodome this week for our intro and outro music. Please head on over to protodome.bandcamp.com. Maybe download an album or two. That'd be terrific.
Do that. We will be back next week. Until then, I am Randy Dickinson.
I am DJ Ross.
Thanks so much for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.